Hi there, it's William Bird here, and this is Chat with the GP. And as you can see from his wonderful surroundings, I'm actually on holiday, and this would, for some people, be an absolute nightmare if you have severe hay fever. So hay fever, or perennial rhinitis, as it's properly known, is because of an allergen. And very often the allergens are during the summer, particularly June, July for grass, but there are many other things that can cause hay fever. So I'm going to go through some of those things. Some of them you may not know. Some of you may be sneezing and coughing or got a runny nose all year round and you've no idea what it is. But let's start from the symptoms. The symptoms tend to be sneezing, a runny nose, sometimes itchy eyes. You get itchy palate. You really want to kind of scratch the top of your mouth there. It can even cause bad breath as well. You're constantly kind of having to breathe through your mouth, and you have that sort of nasal tone to your voice. And all of these things can be as a result of inflammation in the nose. It can actually cause a drip going down the back of the throat, and that causes then a cough. And people often think they've got a chest infection, they've got a virus infection. Actually, this is purely hay fever. So what causes it? Well, there are two types really. The perennial, which is all year round, and the seasonal. So the seasonal can start, and surprisingly can start in January with trees. So the tree pollen starts, and I always have to look these up. So the alder, hazel and yew can start in January and go through to April. They peak in about February and March. So a lot of people come in to the surgery kind of with lots of sneezing in February, end of February, and thinking, what could it be? It can't be hay fever. Well, it is, but it's actually from a tree pollen. Willow, birch a bit later on, and then ash, plane, oak, pine, any of these trees you have around you, they could be March to May. So these are much earlier in the spring. And then you get to the grass, which peaks in June and July. That's the one that's the most common. But again, what people forget is that you get weed pollen from nettles, oilseed rape, the big fields of yellow can sometimes cause really severe hay fever in some people, and that tends to be much more towards the end of the summer, July and August. And then you've got the molds as well, which goes right through to the autumn. So they're the seasonal ones. And the interesting thing is that air pollution, although not a cause of allergic rhinitis itself, can exacerbate any of those allergens. So your nose and your airways tend to be much more sensitive. Now we then go into the perennial ones, and these are house dust mite, pet dander from animals. And what we have to remember for animals, it's not the actual fur or the hair, which people can see, it's actually the skin, the dander, which has come off, or even the saliva from the animal is causing some of the allergy. Mold, of course, the dampness throughout the house can be all year round. And actually even cockroach excretions, which is not a nice thought, but that can also do it. So there are some other things which are slightly less common, although 2% of the population seems to me quite a lot, which is called the pollen food syndrome. And that's when you're eating a vegetable or nuts or even fruit raw, and it creates an allergic response, but not a bad allergic response, not the anaphylaxis, but kind of like hay fever. You get a runny nose, you just feel bad. And that's because it's during often the hay fever season, but not always, where you're allergic to pollen, and the actual protein in the fruit or the vegetable or the nuts are very similar to that pollen. So the body reacts to it and creates an allergic response. So that is, and birch tree pollen seems to be the biggest culprit for that. So you'd get this a lot. You can get it throughout the year, but you can also get this particularly when the birch tree pollen is out. So what are the symptoms other than just, when we said about the sneezing? Well, you can start snoring a lot more. You can get mouth breathing as well. You sound a bit more nasal, and you get this sort of shading under the eyes, particularly children, the kind of dark circles under the eyes. Called an allergic shiner. because it looks like you've got a black eye, and that's due to some of the congestion. You also get what's called the allergic salute in children, where they push their hand up into their nose to try and really scratch the inside of their nose, and therefore they get a little crease at the top of the nose here, which actually is very symptomatic, pathognomonic as they call it, of hay fever, where there's been constant pushing of the nose to try and scratch a nose. So can you diagnose it? Well, those symptoms are pretty obvious for most people, but you can do other tests. You can give a trial of antihistamine or trial of some of the nasal steroids and see if it gets better. But you can also do skin prick testing, and that will actually put the allergen under the skin, and if it reacts, then you're more likely to have an allergy. But not always. 15% of people who have an allergic response that goes up when they have a skin prick actually don't have any allergy at all. But if it's negative, it is very likely that you're not allergic to that thing. That's pretty accurate. So there are some other things which are not allergic response, which is actually part of the immune system called the IgE. And these things which I'm about to list now are not connected with that, but they can create similar symptoms. A sudden change in temperature, sudden change in humidity, physical activity, odors from perfumes or from smoke, or even from really severe air pollution or in industrial areas. All of these can create the symptoms of allergic rhinitis, but they actually are not allergic rhinitis themselves. And they can sometimes merge with obviously the pollen as well and other things there. Some drugs can cause it as well. ACE inhibitors, if you're an ACE inhibitor and you suddenly started to get a blocked nose, runny eyes, and just felt really kind of sneezy, that could have been due to that, or even things like ibuprofen or naproxen or aspirin or beta blockers, they can all cause it. So if you've got HRT, that can also cause it, alcohol, spicy food, and if you've got something up in your nose as well. So that's mostly for children. If there's a kind of, they've got a kind of thing coming down their nose and it's really quite offensive, that's likely to be something that they put up in their nose there. So let's go on to the treatment. Well, the treatment is mainstays, try and avoid it. So if you can avoid, so during the hay fever season, the real peak where you know it's going to be don't try and go out into the grass in the early morning or late evening. That's when it's further down in the actual in the air. During the daytime, it mixes with the heat and rises up. So that actually is when you start to get you start to feel a bit clearer during the middle of the day. It all comes back down again during the evening. Mowing a lawn is not great during the peak season. So all of these things are trying to avoid it. Closing the windows as well during the peak of the hay fever season is going to be sensible. Showering and making sure you wash your hair to get rid of it, and make sure you don't dry your clothes out during the peak of the pollen, because those sheets and others will come back in again, and that will cause obviously constant problems during the night with the pollen on the sheets. Now, house dust mite is the one people really worry about. It is really hard to get rid of, but you can do some major changes to make it better. You can put some coverings, breathable coverings, over the mattress and onto the pillows. You can even get acrylic duvets, try and get rid of the natural products, and also synthetic pillows. Not quite the nicest, but they do help reduce the house dust mite. Making sure you get rid of the carpets in the bedroom. Hard floors are much better, and hoover as much as you can. Wash your sheets every week. Try and keep the humidity lower. So you want the humidity under 50%, but over 30%, because the humidity creates a better living environment for the house dust mite. But you're never going to get rid of house dust mite, unfortunately, but you can control it, and that can be a much better way of delivering it. So those are some of the things that we can do. Now, if all of those fail, you can use inhalers. Inhalers can actually sometimes work. You can get them from a chemist, but you can get them on prescription, which are much stronger nasal steroid inhalers. Do check online how to use them, because so many people use those in the nasal inhalers, and they actually don't quite get it in the right place. So that's something which is something you should just check, because you need to put your head forward a bit, you need to put it up there, keep it away from the middle, keep it slightly out, blow your nose gently beforehand, take a slow deep breath through the nose as you press it, and that will actually really help get into the real back of the nasal tube. So you've got the antihistamines as well, you've got the more sedating ones, which are Piriton, and the non-sedating ones, for example, cetirizine. If they have to be taken all the way through the time that you've got the, so you take it all the way through when you've got the actual problems of hay fever. Try and keep going for at least 4 weeks after that you've actually taken them. So antihistamines for nasal. If you've got eye problems, you've got the sodium chromoglycate eye drops as well. You can put those in, and that can help. And then you've got immunotherapy. So immunotherapy is slightly newer, and where they're putting a small amount of the allergen under the skin or as a subcutaneous or sometimes on the tongue, and that can be done over months or years to slowly desensitize you. It's new, it's developing all the time, but it can actually work. So try and work with your GP to understand what you can do after you've gone through the basics. Steroids sometimes have to be given when it's really bad, not ideal, and certainly the other treatment for asthma, because obviously asthma and hay fever are very strongly related, that might have to be taken as well. So there are some elements there which can work. Avoidance first of all, and then you go on to these more therapeutic ways of doing it. And then sometimes you can just grow out of it. It's quite extraordinary. People can develop it at any age, and you can grow out of it at any age. You've no idea what made that happen or how it did happen. Stress definitely makes it a bit worse. But also, the interesting thing is that if you look at a family of 4 or 5 children, you'll find that the eldest is more likely to have hay fever and the youngest least likely to have hay fever by a significant margin. And that's because when that older child was being brought up, often in a very sterile environment in the house with no colds coming through from the younger siblings, they actually didn't have their immune system quite bashed around enough in early life. So keeping a house not too spotless with the domestos and trying to keep it too clean with bleach, etc. Try and make your child walk around in nature. Picking up dirt is absolutely fine. Getting colds and coughs from nursery is brilliant, because your immune system will become less trigger happy and less likely to get hay fever and other things for later on. So that is hopefully a little bit more information about allergic rhinitis, hay fever. I hope that's helped, and look forward to seeing you. And luckily, I'm not having it at this very moment, but perhaps later on in the day, I might get it. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.